Hello, my name is Elaine Kauffman and I am the resident costume designer here at the Kalamazoo Civic, and I am teaching some basic sewing skills so you can have some skills to bring to volunteer at the costume shop. Today we're going to be learning about the sewing machine. So I'm going to start with some of the parts of the machine. First of all, there should be a knob on the side to turn it on. This particular machine, this is a Bernina machine, which is my favorite. You have to turn it twice in order for the light to come on over here. This over here is the hand wheel, which moves the needle up and down. You always want to be turning the wheel towards you, not away from you. So we have our spool of thread up here. I'll show you in a minute how that gets threaded through the machine. Up here we have our tension. There has to be a certain amount of pressure on the thread in order to form a good stitch. So there's a disc in there that presses against the thread. Most of the time you don't want to mess with that. It stays right in the middle, and there's usually a red line where it is the balanced place. Now we have some dials here, so your stitch width, so if we turn that all the way to the 5, that's going to be a zigzag stitch. Up here we have our stitch choices. Most of the time you're going to stay on this zigzag and straight stitch. So with this, if we're at 0, it's a straight stitch. If we're anywhere in between that, all the way up to 5, that determines the width of the zigzag. And then inside that dial, this turns, which will move the needle position. This is all the way to the right, in the center, and all the way to the left. So there's a couple choices in between when you want to get closer to something. So most of the time you're sewing right in the center, so this is straight up and down. This is your buttonhole, so we'll get into that much later. This is your stitch length, so this goes all the way to 0, which is just stitching right on top of itself, all the way down to 5, which is a very long stitch that you would use for basting things or for running a gathering stitch. Most stitching you're going to do between 2 and 3. So the other thing that happens here, there's this little U-turn kind of arrow. This does a back stitch if you hold this up while you're pressing the pedal, which is here on the floor. This last knob down here we really don't use very often. It's got a little indication of a zigzag and a straight stitch, which is just your normal stitching, and then there's this little grid pattern over here. And what this knob does, it positions or drops what are called the feed dogs, which the feed dogs are underneath the presser foot here, and when you're doing regular sewing, those are going to be pulling the fabric through and moving it smoothly. So if you drop the feed dogs, they don't move the fabric through, and you control the movement of the fabric. So we don't use that function very often. So most of the time this just stays in the regular sewing position. Okay, next we're going to wind a bobbin. This is a bobbin, and we need a spool of thread. So we're going to put the spool of thread on the spindle. We're going to put the bobbin on the spindle over here. Okay, this goes around from the spool of thread around this peg here. There is an arrow on it that tells you you're going the other direction, not just around this way. We're going to come over here to the bobbin and just wind it around to secure it. Then we're going to push this over to the right, and we're going to disengage the needle with the knob that is inside the hand wheel. So you know your bobbin is full if you're filling your bobbin completely. When this is pushed over, when your thread starts coming close to this guide right here. So we can cut the thread. We're going to shift this to the left, take it off, and we will tighten up the knob that is inside the hand wheel to engage the needle again. So up here, the way that we thread the machine, put your spool. This goes behind this guide. It goes on either side of that plate, tension plate that's in there. Comes around. I'm going to put the thread to the right of the hook and the plate, and if you put it in between the two and pull it down, it will snap. You'll hear that, and it'll fall right into the slot that it belongs. Comes down, goes behind the guide, and through the needle. Okay, now we're going to put the bobbin in. So we open this door, and inside is the bobbin case. You pull this lever out and it comes right out. So you can see with the bobbin case here, we've got a little slot right there, and there is a plate right here and a little hole right there. So the bobbin goes into the bobbin case, and you bring it around so the thread drops into the slot, pull it some more, and it drops behind this plate. This is like the tension on the thread above. This adds some tension to the bobbin thread. So you have to have a balance of the two tensions. Again, it's something you don't change very much. There's a little screw there that does change it, but it's rarely used. So now you've got your thread coming out the hole behind the plate. The bobbin goes directly in with this piece sticking straight up. So if you pull this lever out, the bobbin won't fall out. If you don't, the bobbin will fall right out. So it's going to go straight into the machine on the spindle. And you know it's in place when it's not moving around. The way that we start to sew is we need to get the bobbin thread up from below. So you hold the thread in, your upper thread in your left hand, and you turn the hand wheel so the needle goes all the way down, comes back up, and you can see that it has picked up that bobbin thread from below. And you close the door and you're ready to sew. Okay, so now we're going to do a little sample. So we're going to put our fabric underneath the presser foot, and there's a lever back here that puts the foot down so it holds the fabric in place. You have to always make sure you have put this down when you begin sewing, or your thread will just wad right up. So we're going to press the pedal. We're just doing a straight stitch now. Usually you're going to start stitching, then you're going to back stitch for a couple of stitches, go all the way to the end, and back stitch again. Pull it out, cut it close to the fabric, leave a tail from the machine. So that's a straight stitch. Now we're going to change our stitch width to a zigzag so we can see what that looks like. There we are, just a moderate zigzag. Not as necessary to back stitch, and you're not usually zigzagging two pieces of fabric together. So we're going to pull that again, cut it close to the fabric. Okay, when you're ready to sew, you're going to be actually sewing two pieces of fabric together, so we're going to line up the two edges of the fabric, and we're going to put it under the presser foot, and you can see here on this plate that there are lines. These are to help you keep a straight stitch, so you're going to have the edge of your fabric following whichever one of these lines is going to be your seam allowance, your extra on the other side of the seam. So we're going to choose, most of the time it's a 1/2 inch, or sometimes with commercial patterns it's 5/8 of an inch. So we're going to start at the very edge, Put the presser foot down. I'm going to press the pedal, go forward a couple stitches, and backwards, and then go all the way to the end. Keeping your fabric following along that edge. Go to the end, back stitch, get your needle out of the fabric and pull it from the machine, and we have a seam. Okay, so this has been your introduction to the parts of the sewing machine, how the sewing machine is threaded, and using the sewing machine, what it actually does. So you can practice the stitches, you could try some of the other stitches on your machine also. You might want to try drawing some lines on some fabric and just following those lines, even some curves. So get to know your machine. We'll see you again soon.